everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a review of Titans Season 3. The premiere episode was titled Barbara Gordon. Now there will be spoilers in this review, so just beware. If you haven't seen the episode yet, I advise you to go away, catch up with the episode, and then come back to this overall review. Season 3 has debuted now on HBO Max, and you can catch up with the previous 2 seasons on Netflix as well, and you can also look at my review of both of those seasons, and I will leave a link for that video within the description as well. So just quickly on the series overall, whilst I wasn't a fan of the dark, gritty aesthetic tone, I was very unsure as to whether that was the right fit for the Teen Titan characters. There is still potential in the show if it can utilise its characters much more and build on its storylines a bit better. Season 2 was definitely an improvement, which focused a lot more on the conflict with Deathstroke, the introduction of Connor Kent, a Superman clone, and resulted in the death of Donna Troy in the season finale. And also we saw Rachel go ahead to Themyscira as well, and at the very end we saw the entrance of Blackfire, which I believe is Corey's sister, and that will obviously have huge ramifications later on throughout this 3rd season. So in terms of this opening premiere episode itself, I thought the episode was okay. It had some interesting story developments, decent character scenes, but this was very much indeed a Batman-centric story, pushing yet again the Titans to one side and hinting, albeit after one episode, that maybe the Titans themselves are the least interesting characters throughout the show. This is something I've remarked throughout my review of both seasons 1 and 2, that I felt over time that the other characters were getting pushed aside for much more pandering to the Batman source material. And I just think that's a big concern. If you are much more of a Teen Titans fan as opposed to a Batman fan, that going forward that the characters themselves may be put on the side just to kind of provide a lot of fan service moments in terms of the iconic storylines involving Batman that we will see throughout certainly the first portion of this season. So if we go through the episode itself, we started off in the opening scene with Jason Todd back at the base, or the Wayne Enterprises, I guess, and he's basically tracking down the movements of the Joker. He locates them and he calls Bruce on the plane, who wants him to wait until he gets back, but we all know Jason's very much impulsive nature. He'll do whatever he wants anyway. This is something that very much costed him, or almost cost him, if you remember. I think it was the 4th episode of season 2, when we remember he went off on his own, he got captured by Deathstroke and he fell off the building and he had to be saved by Connor, if you remember. But we see Jason take this up and he goes to work. And of course, if you are into DC mythology or DC comics or the animated movies, you know that this is very much the origin of the Death in the Family storyline, which they'll be adapting throughout this season. And we see that play out in the early scenes where we see the Joker come across Jason, beating him down to a pulp with a crowbar. And to be honest with you, I felt this scene was too quick. It was too short. I think if this is a driving force that will certainly be playing out in the first half of this season, I would have preferred if it was much more of a final scene of the actual episode. If basically we got an introduction to the Titans and then we saw at the end Jason go off on his own, and I would have preferred a much more of an extended sequence lasting 5 or 10 minutes where we see Jason going on his own, and we could have really set up more the tension and the suspense, and then we have the reveal of the Joker at the end, and then we get with the brutal attack. I think that would have carried far more weight and impact throughout this episode. But we carry on to the next stages of the show, and then we see Nightwing taking down criminals in the warehouse. This was a good sequence overall. Obviously see the various other Titans as well. Starfire looking very nice in that costume, and she relates to it herself that she's very hot, and yes, I can't dispute that she did look very good in that costume, exhibiting her fire powers as well. We see the emergence, of course, of both Gore and Connor as well, taking down criminals. And yes, I've got to say that Nightwing suit as well looks very good, as we see Nightwing very much taking down the criminals in a very confident manner. I like that, and that's what I'm saying. You know, this is a microcosm of what I think the show should be. It should be the Teen Titans themselves as a unit, as a team, taking down crime fighters. That's the show I want to see. But that can't deny it again. It looked very good, even though it was a very short sequence. And this is where I think we've jumped forward in time, because after the finale of season 2, we now see that the Titans are fully out as an established crime fighting team of San Francisco. We see them all giving interviews. Nightwing, of course, like Batman, stays back in the shadows, and we see that conversation between Corey and Dick, where basically she refers to the fact that he should be out more in the open, but he says, no, I won't do that because that's just like Bruce. We didn't really get involved in all of the interactions with the media. We later on see the first sight of Tim Drake, as again, if you are a DC fan, you know, was the third Robin throughout the Batman mythology. And in the opening scenes, we see him as a delivery boy, we see him talking to cops, and we later on see him talking in his family in a restaurant, and then he sees on the news the death of Jason Todd as reported, and they found his body, so he looks very crestfallen and disappointed. So over the course of the season, we will of course see how he eventually becomes the next Robin. We have later scenes where we see Dick returning back to Wayne Manor once again. And again, this was something that annoyed me throughout season 2, is that Dick is meant to be the leader, but he seems he's more concerned about going out on his own rather than reconnecting and teaming up with the Titans. So he goes down to the Batcave and he sees Bruce wiping away the blood of Jason's costume, because we know Bruce is very resourceful, of course, and he would have gathered all of the evidence from Jason's costume, still analyse it. And I'll still say, as my previous review, I'm just not convinced in Ian Glenn as Bruce. I just think it was a bad casting choice. He's a good actor, but he just doesn't convince me in any way, shape or form that he is Bruce Wayne, and still a Bruce Wayne in his prime as well. You know, it's not the right fit for the character. And then we later see the first reveal of Barbara Gordon, who is very much now a police commissioner. She's wheelchair bound, of course, because again, going back to the DC Comics storylines, we're following on from the Killing Joke storyline where she was shot by the Joker. And we see her with Dick reflecting on why Jason confronted the Joker, and Barbara remarks that she liked him very much, but she knew of his impulsive nature, as I mentioned before. And Dick reaches out to Barbara because he's worried about Bruce, and he wants Barbara to try and reach out to him. And then we follow that on where we get a dinner scene later on between the three, Bruce, Dick and Barbara. And in the beginning, everything seems very cordial as they're reflecting on memories of Jason Todd. But then Bruce, of course, goes back to the current criminal spree going on within Gotham. And then through this conversation, we learn that Jim Gordon, Barbara's father, of course, was dead. Is that he was killed by Mr. Freeze as well? Okay, fair enough. That answers the quick question as to we won't be seeing a Gordon in this season overall. And then Barbara rightly criticises for me that Bruce is too much obsessed by crime, and he's been taking in these young teenagers and eventually driving them away, which is true. And this is a criticism I've felt about the Batman character in general, and essentially stating that he's too obsessive and that he secretly wants the Joker out there so he can carry on living his life as Batman. And of course, Dick wasn't very happy because that wasn't why he brought them all together. But Barbara Gordon, I think, was a good performance by, I think her name is Savannah Welch, I believe the actress is. She's got a very much of that tough resolve about her. She's very cynical, of course, after what happened. And I wonder if they will do a flashback. As to what we saw of Deathstroke, if you remember, we had a huge reference to his overall backstory. Will they do the same for Barbara Gordon? Will we see a certain actress in the bat suit, and then will they play that event out in the future? We're not sure, so we'll see how that develops on there. We later on see Dick, he's hunting on the case of what happened to Jason. He goes into a warehouse, and again, he's looking at the yellow substance. We still didn't get confirmation of that. Again, if you are much more in tune to the comic book storylines, you may know what this substance is. He takes out somebody who I think was a potential dealer in the warehouse, and then he goes back to the Bruce Wayne Enterprises, and he manages to break into the files of Bruce, and then he sees that Bruce is already, it seems, looking for new recruits for the next Robin. If you catch quickly, there was a picture of Carrie Kelly. Again, if you know the comics, that's reference to the Dark Knight Returns storyline. And to be honest with you, I'm not liking this interpretation of Bruce Wayne as a character. They're making him much more of an unhinged, fractured, obsessing character. You know, Jason has just died recently, and already he's looking for new recruits. I just don't like that perception of Bruce Wayne. Again, that's harking back similarities to what we saw with the Snyder inversion of the character from the movies, and I just don't like that. And I think at this stage, as I remarked before, we're getting too much focus on the Batman characters and not enough focus on the Titans themselves. And the only other reference we had was another scene of Corey where she's looking in the bar and she's having a flashback moment. I think we had references to season 2 when they were battling people in that facility, if you remember, when they were holding certain people with abilities hostage. And then she ends up looking in the street. I don't know if this was a dream sequence or whether she actually appeared in the street. I'm not sure. But again, it would have been good from a Titans perspective to explore a bit more on that development, but we didn't do that. And then we go back to the final scene where we see Bruce all bloodied talking to Dick after presumably, I think, killing the Joker, who was incarcerated in prison. Bruce went back and killed him overall. And really, you're kind of thinking, what? Like, why didn't they play that event out? We're having this dilemma, I think, a lot with television shows, particularly of DC, where they want to constantly reference and pander to Batman, but because I think of the deal or the mandate given by Warner Brothers, that where they're so protective of the character, he can only really appear in the live action movies, he can't really appear in the television shows. And we've had this all the way through. I believe we've had certain references all the way from Smallville to Arrow, The Flash, and most recently Gotham, of course, where these shows, they constantly referring to Batman, they're using all of his characters, all of his villains, but they can never use the character. And I've just believe, you know, if you can't use Batman fully, which would bolster the storyline, then don't use him at all. And this scene in particular, how much more impactful would it have been if we had a sequence where we saw Batman go to the prison and beat Joker down? Again, that's a key ingredient of the particular storyline that they're adapting. That would have had far more weight. But because we're shortcutting it, much like we had the Jason Todd in the beginning sequence, where again, we can't use the Joker to an extent, we're just shortcutting the episode. It would have had a far more impactful ending to the episode if we actually saw that. But we see him appearing, he's all bloodied, and then all of a sudden he states to himself that he can't do this on his own, and essentially he asks now for Dick to be a better Batman. Like, that doesn't make any sense because Dick never wants to be Batman. You know, that was the whole reason he broke away from Bruce in the first place, because he wants to be his own individual. So this was just a very weak sequence. Then we see at the end at the floor where he drops the crowbar that the Joker obviously used to kill Jason. So I just think overall that was a very weak ending to the episode. And I just think if you're going to reference these storylines, then either go all the way or don't use them at all. But a decent episode, but I think the Titan characters got sidelined. And also, I think if you're going to use these iconic storylines, then either go all the way with them or don't do them at all. And I think there were certain sequences that we could have had a much more powerful impact if we'd have seen them in their extended form. But I liked the Barbara Gordon performance. As I said before, I enjoyed the sequence where we saw the Titans fighting together, and hopefully throughout the rest of the season we can get back far more to that team dynamic and we cut more into the Titans, because it is a Titan show and not a Batman show. So I do understand that we would be adapting the Red Hood storyline, certainly for the first 4 to 5 episodes, as what I've seen from a lot of reviews that people got early screeners. But I hope over the course of the season, as I said before, we make it much more of a Teen Titan centric series than a Batman series overall, because we've got plenty of Batman content coming, and I think that would be detriment to the show if we get too much focus on Batman overall. So those are my thoughts and feelings on the opening premiere episode of Titans Season 3. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If there are any further standout episodes of the series, then I will continue to review those as well. And of course, I will do reviews for the season finale and also the season overall, as what I normally do in these television reviews. If you do like my content and you've got any suggestions for any other TV shows related to DC or Marvel or any other content that you'd like to see me review, then let me know in the comments as well. Please also hit and like those subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.